Oh my goodness. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Zach Schomler. This is Strong Opinion Sports, episode 660. And joining me is one of my favorite people in the whole world. So I can't make you number one, I'm sorry, but it's Nathan Hawthorne.
That's
Nathan,
fine.
how you doing, man?
Hey, I don't need to be number one. That's fine. Just carve me out a little space. I'm doing great tonight.
I want to be very transparent with the audience. We've been going really long. Like, we did a 4.5-hour episode last week. Me and Logan went like 3 hours and 9 minutes yesterday. I would like to get in and out of here in like an hour 15. We the boundary we set today, boundary is the wrong word, but it was actually my idea, because I'm like, we've been going long. I think the audience has kind of probably overwhelmed a lot of content. And also, like, you and I both have full-time jobs. I was like, hey, let's do an hour if we can. At an hour 15, no matter where we're at, we're just going to start to wrap it up. I want to be done in an hour and a half regardless today. That's the plan. Today, we've got a list. You know, I went through with Logan about 20 topics that I'm excited for this football season, college and NFL. You got your list. I want to just go through your list today for time-sensitive reasons, but also because I don't have much more to add on top of what I said yesterday with Logan. I kind of, burned all of my stuff to say. There's really only one thing I will say, and let's acknowledge this. I think I was too high on Philly. They were 15-2 in my predictions, and I was too low on the Chargers. Talking to you, talking to Logan, really thinking about it. I think the Chargers win much faster than I kind of predicted. I don't know where yet. 4-13, I think is what I predicted them. It feels wrong given they've got an elite quarterback. They've got some pieces on defense that aren't terrible. And I think actually the offense in LA with the people they have are not, there's no superstar receiver, for example, right? But they've got guys that I think are going to be really solid contributors. And when you pair solid contributors in a good system with an elite quarterback, it's hard to win only 4 games. And so I don't know where I'm going to land yet, but I am going to let everyone know I'm recording Wednesday night by myself, answering Patreon questions, doing whatever. I'm going to revisit the Chargers prediction, give them another win or two. I just don't know where yet. I got to sit down, carve it all out. And then the same with Philly. I think Philly's going to have an incredible year, win their division. I think the Eagles going 15-2. Man, I think it's a little generous.
That's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's just, but I do think they are a top 3 team in the NFC. It's them or LA, probably. Them or the Rams. So probably the 3rd best team in the NFC. It's really interesting to me. And then Atlanta's in the mix in there too. Atlanta, the Rams, and Philly kind of vying for that 3rd spot in the NFC. So I'm going to take 2 wins away from Philly. I don't know where yet. 2, maybe we'll go through the process. Maybe it's more. I don't know. But I'm going to find a way to add wins to the Chargers, take wins away from Philly, and then the consequences of that will also be reported. That'll come out Thursday morning, right? The day we kick off the NFL season. I also think you and me, we're doing an episode. I don't know I can't remember if it's Thursday night or Friday night. It's going to be quick and dirty, like hopefully 30 minutes, just about the game on Thursday night. Yeah. I don't care much about, the Friday game. I think it's Philly and Green Bay. They play Friday night in Brazil. Yep. I'm less excited about that, but I want to make an episode about the opening game of the year, Kansas City and Baltimore. That's going to be really fun, and I want to just, you and me sit down. We talk about just that later in the week. But, dude, SOS people. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I also like to address something.
Yeah.
I was out thinking the room. I 100% thought that both of the games to start the NFL season were, like the international games, like a London or a Mexico City or Brazil, where it's at Sao Paulo now. So shout out to you guys. Give me a little bit of correction there in the comments. Was definitely outthinking the room. But we'll be excited to see Kansas City raise that last Super Bowl banner.
Heck yeah. Now, before we get into your list of stuff, so we covered Philly, we covered the Chargers. I want to talk about LSU. There's 3 college football games I would like to talk about. Number 1, USC beat LSU in a really, really fun, really exciting game. USC won 27-20 with like 8 seconds left. They scored the game-winning touchdown. I wanted to say, before we get into what happened, what we saw, I was so impressed with both teams, actually. I think they're both in a really good spot. Their programs have come a long way. Everyone's going to come down really hard on LSU, but man, I actually walked away really impressed with LSU. It's game 1. That's a really tough way to start your season. I'm more impressed with USC finding a way to win, and actually beating an SEC team is huge. But I want to just give a shout out to both programs for scheduling that game and making that happen. That's ballsy. People are going to hate on Brian Kelly. I really like him. And I want to hear your thoughts. But man, it was a great game. And the thing I want to say, it was so much better than that Notre Dame Texas A&M game the night before. Like the game that was supposed to be a big game Saturday night was a total dud and awful. And what we got from LSU and USC was high-level quarterback play from both teams and really fun, exciting football. And I loved, even though it could have been higher scoring, it felt like there were more points left on the board.
Definitely.
Still a great game. What was your takeaway from USC beating LSU 27-20?
Yeah, I thought we saw some growing pains for both teams, right? Both of them have QBs drafted top of the draft. You know, Jaden Daniels from LSU, Caleb Williams obviously going number 1 overall from USC. So to see two quarterbacks come in, Nussmeier and Miller Moss, come in and play the way that they did, some mistakes here and there, some things I think that'll get worked out throughout the course of the season. I was very impressed with that. I thought the offenses both moved the ball well, but you could tell that some things just weren't quite clicking all the way for us to score those points. Like we anticipated this being a relatively high scoring game. Obviously still plenty of points on the board. I think the thing that impressed me most was USC's defense. I was so incredibly shocked with not just the high level of assignment football they played, but they played physical. I expected LSU to really start to lean on them, in the second half and really start to take a toll and move the rock both on the ground and through the air. USC hung tough, obviously, the entire way through, found a way to win. Obviously, they didn't get a stop when they needed to. You know, they forced Miller Moss to go down there and change the game. But it was very, very impressive to see this USC defense not have a 70-point scored on them. So the bar is low already for that defense. You know, it couldn't have been much worse last year, but to see the improvement that they had week 1 LSU neutral site game was very impressive.
I want to give a shout out to USC's defense on 4th and goal early in the game, 3-yard line. I loved LSU going for it, 4th and goal from the 3-yard line, but even better was USC's defense getting a stop. They had a free blitzer come in the A-gap. It was an awesome design for the defense. It ruined the play. And it's, I think we've seen the best USC defense we've seen, man, since like Pete Carroll, basically. It's been so long, especially in the Lincoln Riley era, though. We've been waiting and waiting. The defense has always been the problem. And what we saw from USC, I have visions in my head of that team. There's a video out there of them like coming off the field against Alabama, like they're like barking like dogs, and they're like trying to people like holding them back, and then they got creamed. They got obliterated by that Alabama team. That's like the Max Brown USC era. This was, I thought, a statement from USC beating an SEC team. It would have been a big win for LSU, but it's a bigger win for USC. It's your first game as a Big Ten program. To have that kind of win, a statement win over LSU, an SEC program, and I think a really good top 2 or 3 SEC program this year, LSU, monumental victory for them. It could not have been a better way for them to start their season. They looked really good up front on offense and defense. Look, man, the big boys that they're recruiting at USC it's game changing. I mean, I remember for years at Oklahoma, like the problem was, hey, they just can't hang physically with an SEC program. And even at USC, like if Caleb Williams had this defense last year, I really wonder, what the
potential would have looked like.
I want to say, what's that? He's a backup quarterback for the Chargers for a long time. He's trying to be a broadcaster. He is. He's doing well. But Chase Daniel said something that really, I don't get pissed off very often. Like I actually left like a really shitty angry comment and then I deleted it. I was like, I just don't want to actually. And then I deleted Threads entirely. I was like, I'm just done with the internet. Fuck this. But he was like questioning whether Miller Moss gives USC a better chance to, win a playoff game than Caleb Williams. And it's like, I don't know why we have to have that conversation, let alone, I think it's a ridiculous thing to say, but it's also like, why is that conversation being had? It's a different era. Like USC didn't have a defense last year that was acceptable at all. Like it's hard to blame that on Caleb Williams and even have a real meaningful conversation like that. And also, why take away from Caleb Williams or Miller Moss? So I hated that discussion happened, and I thought it was really, really bad, journalism, broadcasting, whatever you want to call it, commentating from Chase Daniel. It bothered me a lot to like, it's like, dude, don't be that guy. You're new to the commentation world and commentary world. Don't make that your slant to get rage bait. I don't like it at all. And I have to say that it has to come out of me to get that out there. But Miller Moss was incredible. He really was. I think both quarterbacks left things on the table. Garrett Nussmeier and Miller Moss are both juniors. And the thing that really stands out, I thought both quarterbacks were outstanding. They both had flashes of brilliance. I thought Miller Moss in the end made a few more plays, but Garrett Nussmeier looked like Joe Burrow at times. His ability to move in and out of the pocket, his comfortability. He had answers to everything USC did. He missed a couple throws. It's forgivable in game one, your junior year starting. But immediately I was like, oh, this is the best quarterback play we've seen all week in college football week one. And it was kind of a rough week for college football quarterbacks. Like Cameron Ward was impressive. Nico Iamaleava was great at Tennessee, but otherwise there weren't a lot of standout quarterbacks. These two both really stood out to me, and they immediately became guys on my radar as NFL quarterbacks. Like, oh, wow, these guys are going to progress, and they're both juniors. I want to say this, though. It's really rare you see a quarterback stick it out after sitting behind a Heisman Trophy incredible quarterback, both Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, USC and LSU. Both guys did. They sat, they learned, they paid attention, they worked their butts off, and hard work pays off. And also, I think staying at a program with really good coaching is always a wise decision. I think of Keaton Slovis at USC. I consider him a friend. I really love him. He chose to transfer out when Caleb Williams came to USC, and that was probably right for him getting on the field. But I really look back at that decision, and I mean no shade at Keaton. I love him so much, but I wonder what would have happened if he'd stayed and been Caleb's backup. And, we saw Matt Castle years ago sit behind really good quarterbacks at USC and still get a shot in the league. It just really makes me wonder, is it smart to leave a program with great coaching? It's going to challenge you a lot. I just really think, does it suck to sit behind Caleb Williams, who's getting all the highlights and getting all the reps and, getting all the attention and taking your job? Yes, but you are going to learn a lot about football being coached by Lincoln Riley, sitting behind an incredible quarterback. It's clear Miller Moss took a ton of mental reps, worked his ass off to learn behind that young quarterback. I don't think the timeline made sense for Keaton to stay. I don't want to attack him at all. I love him. But he got far worse coaching at Pitt and then BYU and far worse help around him. Miller Moss, man, earned this and worked his ass off and waited and sat for a long time. And it's just cool to see a guy stick it out and become, what really both these quarterbacks, Nuss and Moss, became. I'm just so sold on both of them immediately after watching one game. What do you make of them?
I thought they both looked great, but you know me, I would love to give a shout out to the wide receiver play. There were some incredible catches made out there on both sides of the football, on USC side, on the LSU side. Man, it was just special. So to see these quarterbacks trusting their wide receivers, putting the ball in places that's difficult, and those guys going up and get it, I thought that was awesome. As far as, quarterbacks and transferring, I think that's probably the one that's a little bit more delicate, just because the greatest teacher is actually doing it yourself and getting those repetitions. And you might leave coaching, but at the same time, you want to get out there and you want to be able to play and develop, which you can't do unless you are playing. You see that at all different levels. It's real easy to sit in the room, know the plays, know the playbook, but until you have those live bullets flying at you, it's going to be tough. Other positions, I 100% agree with. Like if you're a linebacker, D-line, or you're a safety, wide receiver, and you're playing behind some seriously talented dudes, sit back, watch, learn. Don't go chase playing immediately, because, you can go grab a bag at somewhere like Pitt, right? But you don't know who your quarterback is going to be. And you might chase a great quarterback who's going to a bad program, and then all of a sudden now you guys are both screwed. So I can certainly see both sides. I think quarterback's a little bit more nuanced as far as transferring out to play. But those other position groups, man, just if it's right for you and your family, you got to stay, especially if you have great coaching.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app, and you can use Prize Picks while you watch NFL games this fall, because making picks makes watching games more engaging, and you could turn something like $5 into $50. Now, Prize Picks offers quick and easy deposits. You can even use Apple Pay. So put your skills to the test in daily fantasy. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That is prizepicks.com/CLNS, code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. I want to say I do not want Keaton Slovis to be mad at me. Like I don't know if I spoke there or misstepped by saying all that, but his situation specifically is more complicated than that. But I wanted to just praise Miller Moss for sticking around. Anytime you don't lose a job, look, I transferred multiple times in college after losing a job. Like, I'm not, I did what I did, try to get on the field. I don't want to throw shade at anyone. I just also, man, like I think being a backup at USC right now with Lincoln Riley especially, like that's an opportunity to learn a lot about football. And really, I just think, like I know I personally would enjoy being the number 2 at USC and getting to observe and hear what those meetings are like and see, again, like I would pay so much money to be in every single quarterback room at USC. I would pay to walk on and do that and never play, hold a clipboard and just be able to observe. I know I'd become a better quarterback and better at, not that I'm a quarterback anymore, but you get my point. Like the valuable training and learning you can receive. It's like a degree in quarterback by sitting behind Caleb Williams and now Miller Moss, USC. Like I wonder who their backups are. I'd love to interview one of them someday, but I just can only imagine that those quarterback rooms are really, really full of lots of opportunity to learn and grow. And I was not intending to take a shot at Keaton. I love him so much, and it pained me to watch him go to Pitt and get, frankly, I think bad coaching and not a lot of help. It was tough to watch. I was like, I just don't think he's getting the help necessary. Anyway, I do want to say, it's a tale of two Kyrons, Kyron Lacey and Kyron Hudson. They're spelled differently, but both young receivers, USC and LSU. They are unbelievable players. And I think they're both really young. Kyron Hudson let me look it up, is a freshman, I want to say. Kyron Lacey's a senior. Kyron Hudson is a junior, so I'm totally wrong. But both made some incredible plays. I thought Kyron Hudson actually left some on the table. He had a couple drops, in my opinion, plays that could have been made. I'm curious what you would say about that. But one thing that stands out across college football week 1, incredible receiver play everywhere. Like the receiver position, which it really might reflect that when kids are young, high school, even middle school, if you can play, they're putting you on offense. Like we're just not. We're putting our best receivers, best athletes at the receiver position where they can score points and have a bigger impact on games. And it reflects when you look at how incredible these receivers are. What do you have to say about all that?
I think we're seeing an explosion in 7v7, and that's giving these wide receivers and quarterbacks, honestly, way more reps than they used to get because this happens all spring and all summer where these guys are going out, from tournament to tournament. They're playing with the best of the best. They're playing against the best of the best. And they're getting these live reps in to work on their releases, work on their contested catches, work on the routes. And I know that people, love to talk about 7-on-7 and say it's not beneficial or it's not helpful. It is. Because when you have to match up, say you're the number 5 wide receiver in the country and you've got the number 3, defensive back over the top of you with the number 2 safety and he's looking at you because these teams get stacked. How are you going to show up and play? It teaches you to have that dog mentality, to fight, to go up for contested catches. Like it is truly valuable. So again, you've got these guys, starting in middle school and they have these development programs. I think of programs like South Florida Express, who's had, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. Both of those cats that are at Ohio State. Like that's some serious talent. Jurion Dickey, who's now at the University of Oregon. Like there is so much value that comes from playing in these 7-on-7 tournaments and events. Just purely on the competition side, these guys are they're finishing high school more polished and they're reaching collegiate football more polished as route runners and catchers, but they still have to learn, obviously, how to apply that within an offense and within the offense specifically that they're in. So, yeah, we're just seeing that skill get developed sooner, and then it just becomes about that mental side and those small nuances that take you from, an average receiver to a good receiver to an elite receiver.
Remind me after the show. I got some shade to throw, but I don't want to. I don't want to do it here. But I want to talk about the topic of 7-on-7. I just put a note here. Or just remind me in the post show after we record to mention that because I got an interesting thing to tell you, but I just don't want to say it here. Oh, by the way, I do want to say this, and anyone listening will find this kind of fun and interesting. I was given a PC today, and I think that my adopted brother who played high school football with you gave me a PC. I'm so excited. Like for the audience out there, I know anyone listening, if you know, dude, I am stoked to get into the PC world and have fun with that.
All right.
It's really powerful and it's cool. I just thought I should probably I meant to mention that at the top of the show. Man, I'm excited for Garrett Nussmeier too. I think in the loss he's going to get criticized and forgotten about, but I'm excited for their year. I look at LSU the rest of the year. I still think even with the loss, even though I'm sure they're going to get lots of hate and they're going to talk about how Brian Kelly wins the first game of the year or loses the first game of the year every year, blah blah blah, like all these narratives that are whatever. I'm actually still really stoked for LSU. They were a couple plays away. They're going to see a lot on film they can make adjustments to and learn from. The year is not over at all for LSU. It's a 12-team college football playoff. I still think they could win the SEC. Like it's really probably going to be a fun conversation with Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, and then I think Tennessee's maybe in the mix. We'll see their young quarterback, but one of those 5 teams is going to win the SEC in my opinion, unless I'm forgetting something crazy. But I still have not counted LSU out. They're still a team in the mix in my opinion. You lose one tough game. I think it's going to reflect poorly on them because the image of USC is lesser, but the story here should be that USC is just different up front than we've ever seen before. And then you look at the USC schedule and you're like, wait a minute, they have a really, really favorable schedule the rest of the year. What do they play? A Notre Dame team at the end of the year. If they can beat Michigan and, Penn State is no slouch. But we're a team, and by the way, they play at Michigan in 2 weeks. That's a tough one. Like, let's acknowledge I guess it's more like 3 weeks, 2 games, but 3 weeks. September 21st at Michigan. It's a tough game. A game I think they can win for sure. But I just want to acknowledge, man, that I think USC has a chance to run the table and maybe even be in that Big Ten title game against an Ohio State because they don't play Oregon, they don't play Ohio State. They've got a pretty favorable schedule the rest of the year, and keep your eye on USC. I think they're a different program this year than they were in years past.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see it for both teams.
We got to talk about Florida State. I can't remember what I predicted. Was it undefeated from Florida State?
You might have said something silly. You might have said something silly like that.
I was like 11-1 or 10-2. I hope, but no matter what, this Florida State team is not what I was expecting at all. I thought their schedule was light. Even with a light schedule, they look like they are going to get their butts kicked. They're 0-2 now. I'm not gonna. I didn't watch a game tonight. I'm just looking at the box score. They lost 28-13. I don't find myself that interested in wanting to watch the game. What I will say, even their first game against Georgia Tech, like DJ Uyunglele, really unimpressive. He's got a 50% completion percentage exactly tonight in a loss to Boston College. Good for Billy O'Brien, by the way. Bill O'Brien beats Florida State in his first ever game as head coach of Boston College. That's pretty cool. But I just want to comment on Florida State being 0-2. Like, it's already very clear. I was way off on my prediction. This program, wow, they have in 1 year totally transformed into something much worse. And we'll track how the rest of the year goes. They're on my radar, but an 0-2 start for Florida State was not something I expected, and in fact is really alarming.
I think what we realize is how good Jordan Travis actually was for that team on the offensive side of the football. I think covering up maybe a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it vanilla-ness, but something clearly wasn't right because when he got injured last year, that offense couldn't move the football. This year with DJU, and we knew DJU wasn't great as a Pac-12 guy, he's been bad. Okay, let's not try and mince words here. Not a great quarterback. He can always show flashes. Anyways, offense not good. Defense graduated, I believe, a number of guys, including Jared Verse, and so I think this team that had a lot of talent last year doesn't have as much talent, did their best to replace it, and it's just not working out. I mean, losing to Boston College, and maybe we don't know how good Boston College actually is, but losing to Boston College, you just get. Their quarterback was kind of feisty. Was it Castellano or Costello?
I mean, 10 for 16, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, he's not. I want to be very clear about this.
He was. Go ahead.
Yeah. Boston College ran the ball 52 times for 263 yards. And on the flip side, Florida State ran 16 times for 21 yards. Yikes. I haven't watched the game. I want to be very honest about that. That's alarming. Anytime you get outgained that much on the ground and probably beat up front. And actually, that box score makes me want to watch the game. Like, how bad was it up front for Florida State? Maybe I will and talk about that on Wednesday. But it's just not going. No matter how you look at it, the thing I want to comment on is the 0-2 start and the new quarterback DJU. It's not a good start at all. It's not going well. This is not what they needed to do to start the year. 0-2, listen to Georgia Tech and Boston College. If you told me that, in March, I'd be like, are you serious? That's horrifying. I mean, that's just with no context. Yeah. I watched the Georgia Tech game. I didn't watch this Boston College game, but just those two programs are not teams you're gonna lose to if you're a top 10, really, really competitive team. This does not look like a playoff team. And frankly, nowhere near the best team in Florida. I don't know if Florida State and Florida play each other this year. If they do, I'm fascinated to see who is worse. I don't know. Clearly, Miami has the most talent in that state right now. Yeah, they do. End of the year, November 30th, they play at home against Florida in Tallahassee. Dude, that's going to be a really interesting toilet bowl. Florida will not have a head coach. I can't imagine they fire Martin McNorvell, who's done so much good at Florida State, but that's a weirdly fascinating bad game, actually, in November that I'm curious about. I think you watched a little bit of this game. I want to be very transparent. I did not watch this game at all. I think you watched a little bit of it. But what did you see in the little bit you did watch of Florida State, Boston College?
What I saw was the Florida State offense unable to move the football, dropping back for a lot of different passes, needing to move DJU out into space in order to make a throw. It didn't seem like he could deliver from the pocket. He rolled out a couple times, made a couple of good throws. He hit actually a pretty strong field out on their touchdown drive, but just so much inconsistency. And then, on the defensive side of the ball, it seemed like they had no push whatsoever. And again, this is just, in the middle of my fantasy football draft, I'm looking up, I'm looking down, but at no point did it look like Florida State was in control of the game. It just felt like I was seeing the quarterback from Boston College escaping, running all over them, extending plays, and Florida State couldn't get off the field. It was just sad. It was sad.
No good.
It was sad.
Football season is here, and that means it's time to go to football games. The Game Time app makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the start of any sporting event. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Here's what Game Time does for you. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. There are zone deals where you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. They have all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. There are seat views where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And Game Time has the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And on top of all of that, Game Time has ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account on Game Time, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Last thing on college football, man. You watched this Oregon-Idaho game. Oregon won 24-14. Look, man, I want to just say, again, not a game I watched. You did watch it. You're a big Oregon fan. You're an Oregon guy. Dylan Gabriel had a stat line that would suggest they won by like a ton of points. To me, it looks like they didn't finish drives from an outsider's perspective. What did you see when you watched the Oregon-Idaho game?
Yeah, I think there's one of two things. The first thing off is a lack of physicality across the board, offense and defense. To me, it seemed like everybody was just asleep. And fortunately, they happened to be way more talented than Idaho, so they were able to win that game really without issue. I'm curious if either A, Dylan Gabriel is limited, which I don't believe the case is, B, he's still learning the system. Guys are still learning the system. There actually was quite a bit of turnover on our offensive line. It's really hard for me to say. And last year we kind of struggled with Fresno State out of the gate. I don't know if it's a case of the first game, not sharp, not ready. It's only Idaho. But I was just not impressed with the physicality. Other things we can clean up. We can be more efficient on offense. The ball will move. The ball will get in the end zone. That's what Oregon does. But if they don't start playing more physical, it is going to be an ugly Big Ten schedule and an ugly Big Ten year. If you can't push around Idaho, I don't know, maybe Idaho's the best SCS team in the country. But if you can't push around Idaho, you're not pushing around
They're not,
anybody
by the
else
way.
in the Big Ten.
They are
We
not
don't
the
know.
best. No, they're not. I'm sorry.
They started at 7. They started this year at 7. They went to playoffs back-to-back years. They did just their quarterback now does have a injured shoulder, clavicle, something like that. So very unfortunate for him. I know that he was very excited. But yeah, just lack of physicality. Really hated to see it happen that way.
I also don't know if people realize. So I went to Washington State, 8 miles from Moscow, Idaho. I spent a lot of time at Idaho. Like actually, Idaho, Moscow had way better food, and I love the girls there. I had a great time.
Okay.
Giovanni Bernard was he's actually now the Oregon State quarterback. He left Idaho last year. They clearly found a solution. That guy's injured too. I guess you're right. I'm not very plugged into what Idaho football is. I know when I was there, they were awful. Maybe they're a really good FCS program. It's just I don't care. I watched Alabama beat the living tar out of the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, right? Like 56-0 in the end of the third quarter. That's what I expected from Oregon against Idaho. That's what you should do against a program like that.
100%.
To not execute, to not finish drives is a problem. I don't care. I just know that people I know in the Big Ten country that Oregon's on the radar for the first time ever were like, are you serious? This is what the Pac-12 is sending us? Like, in fact, almost seriously saving face for former Pac-12 schools. USC beating LSU was really important because otherwise it would have looked like every Pac-12 school that came to the Big Ten is kind of a joke. Honestly, I really think that's kind of the image of the Big 12 schools coming over. It's an awful outcome that like can't happen. I love Dan Lanning. I love what they're doing. And maybe it's just, it's week 1 and you got to clean some stuff up. And that's part of why you schedule Idaho is if you have stuff to clean up, LSU is going to have an unforgiving loss that I think if the LSU had started with Old Dominion or someone random to clean stuff up and get the jitters out, maybe they beat USC in week 2, but because they started a really challenging game, there's no forgiveness there. Thankfully, Oregon, if they are really good and this is just a weird bad loss and there were things they needed to clean up on film, thankfully it was Idaho and not someone serious that's a high-level opponent. Yeah.
One thing you can always control is your effort. And it just didn't seem like high effort, high physicality football. And that's the part that scares me the most being an Oregon fan is, perhaps we win a few games. Maybe you beat Ohio State. Maybe you don't. Maybe you only have one loss. But, man, if it ever comes time to meet an SEC team or, that top of the Big Ten, it's just going to be really tough.
Man, let's now talk about your list. I actually highlighted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the things. I'm looking at the same spreadsheet you are. Yeah. I want to skip, Dallas, the Jets, and Atlanta. We'll cover them if we have time. I want to start by talking about rookie wide receivers. You were a Division I wide receiver. I really respect your insight when it comes to wide receivers. This is something I haven't talked about at all. Your question I'm looking at says, who becomes kind of the number 1 wide receiver from this class? I'm curious, does that mean this year? Does that mean long term? But let's talk about rookie wide receivers. I want to hear your perspective on them.
Yeah, let's talk about both. Let's talk about what happens this year. Anytime you get drafted in the first round or the top of rounds, there's an expectation that you play right away and you make an impact for your team. And then obviously, we want to see, does that have longevity or is it kind of a fizzle? Excuse me. There's a number of number 1 wide receivers drafted, and I think that they all kind of actually got drafted into different situations, which is what makes it so interesting to me. Between Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison, and Brian Thomas Jr., I'm curious, what this looks like offensively for these guys. Just starting off at the top line level, Malik Neighbors, not going to be anyone to really share targets with him, but downside, he's got Daniel Jones throwing him the football. Okay, what does that look like? Then you got Rome Odunze. He's going to be the number 3 wide receiver. You got to compete for those targets with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Even Cole Kmet at tight end. That's going to be tough. Marvin Harrison Jr., that's, I think, probably the best opportunity. I think he'll be great right off the rip with Kyler. I think it'll open things up for Michael Wilson as well. I think so. Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably set up the best, and then Brian Thomas Jr., whom I really, really, really like with the Jaguars. He's got Trevor Lawrence throwing him the football. The anticipation is that he kind of steps into that Calvin Ridley role. Hopefully catches the ball a little bit better than Calvin did last year. But there's just so much opportunity, I think, for these couple of guys, these first-round guys. And I wanted to hear your perspective on who has the best situation of these top four.
First of all, I think Malik Neighbors is probably the most talented. Like if I was a quarterback, the guy I'd want to play with is Malik Neighbors. Like that dude is unreal talent-wise, followed very closely by Marvin Harrison Jr. But I think Malik Neighbors is a better athlete who is just really dynamic, and I hope becomes a true number one wide receiver. I think he will be. Being the most talented doesn't mean you've got high-level production this year. Again, having Daniel Jones as a quarterback is a limiting factor. Marvin Harrison Jr., look, say what you want about Kyler. Does he win? Is he a flawed leader? But he can throw the dang ball. And I actually picked Michael Wilson, they're the number 2 receiver in my fantasy draft, almost all of them, because he was like so devalued. And I'm like, look, he's the number 2 receiver, got a great quarterback who's going to throw on the rock, Kyler Murray. Yeah. I think there's a lot of production from Marvin Harrison Jr. So like he could have the best year statistically. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, for Brian Thomas Jr., man, is, I think when it's all said and done.
I'm so high on him.
Oh my God. Like Malik Neighbors is going to have a really hard path just because of the quarterback situation there. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is awesome. I wonder, I don't want to say overdrafted. I want to be very careful here. I don't actually want to say anything bad about Marvin Harrison Jr. I just find myself really impressed with Brian Thomas Jr. I look at Brian Thomas Jr. I'm like, dude, I think he's like a true like number 1 receiver, just doing incredible stuff. I know he's got Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk, but I think he could. In fact, I drafted him in almost all my drafts because he was, again, a guy you could get way late in the draft who I think is going to be a number 1 receiver for Trevor Lawrence. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about Rome Odunze because I'm not that excited. Not is it just the fact he's got to share targets with other receivers, but I don't know what he does physically that you're like, that's just 1 in a million. Like, you're not going to find another guy like that. What's your take on Rome Odunze? I'm just going to drag my feet. I don't want to say anything negative here. I'm excited for the get. I like his personality. I like his work ethic. He does a lot of great stuff like off the field and how he approaches stuff. But what do you make of him? Like, what's he going to turn into? I'm curious for your prediction there, and we'll have fun looking back on it as time goes on.
To me, he feels like a Larry Fitzgerald type guy. And I don't want people to get caught up, me thinking Rome's going to be an instant, Hall of Fame wide receiver. But what Rome does well is catch the ball. He makes contested catches. He knows how to use his body, and he knows how to use his hands. When it's time to jump up, grab it, and rip it, when it's time to show the late hands, when it's time to extend, when it's time to catch with the body, he just brings the ball in, and he's a natural catcher, and he just feels it. He has great timing when that ball is coming a little bit high and over the middle, like when to time that jump. And I think that's what makes him so great. Compared to the rest of the wide receivers, I don't think he's as physically talented in terms of having kind of that wiggle. And I think that's a little bit more limiting for him. I don't think he's, the best at breaking a guy off on a route. He's got solid straight line speed, but as far as having the tools to be a great wide receiver, to be a great right. Wow.
Now it's in your head, dog.
My head now. He has the tools to be an elite wide receiver. And it'll be interesting to see how he is used on that team.
Would you say Rome Odunze it's skill-based, right? Jerry Rice was not the best athlete at the receiver position, but he worked his butt off and did little things like technical stuff very well. You don't have to be the best athlete to be a great receiver. Maybe Rome Odunze's path is he's really physical. Is he physical over the middle, like running crossing routes?
He wasn't asked to do it a ton at UW, more field side work. But I don't see him shying away from catching the football. He played with broken ribs for a number of games last year. Toughness is not a thing for Rome.
See, that gives me, I'm glad I wasn't negative about Rome Odunze because I would say it's like not enough information collected. Dude, as a quarterback, a receiver who is going to be physical, go get the football, use your hands, have great body control, like that's so much like you want in a receiver. Like it's hard to ask for more. The only thing, like to me, like my stereotypical receiver I would love is Malik Neighbors. The guy who's just going to go get jump balls and like make me look good if I miss inaccurately a little bit. Yeah. But Romo Dunes, I want to be thoughtful with how I observe him, because I've got an open mind. It's clear to me he's not like the same level athlete as some of these other top receivers in the NFL. But again, neither was Hines Ward, right? Hines Ward was not an incredible athlete. He was gritty. He was tough. He ran great routes. He was physical. It's not only athleticism. In fact, Kadarius Toney's a great athlete and a terrible wide receiver. So like, athleticism isn't everything. Yeah. Brian Thomas Jr., though, to me, I wonder if years from now, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to get shine, and his dad is a legend, blah, blah, blah. Do you think Brian Thomas Jr. has potential to become the best receiver in this draft class? Is it? I want to, and before you answer, actually, I want to say, like, the thing Marvin Harrison Jr. has for him is a Hall of Fame work ethic. He learned that from his dad. I think his level of attention to detail is great, and I'm so sure Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to hit. I think I almost overlook him because it's kind of like, yeah, it's a given. Brian Thomas Jr. is more unknown, so I think I might find it more interesting, but I think he could be like a great number one in Jacksonville. What do you make of Brian Thomas?
Yeah, I think between Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas, I think all of them have that potential, and I think a lot of it comes down to opportunity, right? Who's throwing you the football and what offense are you a part of? That is so much of who you are as a wide receiver, is that situation that you're in. And I think that he certainly has the potential to do that, but obviously only time will tell. That's a pretty lame answer, but I have no doubt that he has enough skills in the tool belt. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the hands that he could do it.
Well, I would say look at Marvin Harrison's dad, Marvin Harrison Sr. He had Peyton Manning and Reggie Wayne. Like, it's a lot easier to succeed when you're in that offense playing with Peyton freaking Manning, and you got Reggie Wayne across the other side, making it harder to put you in one-on-one coverage. Like, you get better matchups in that situation. It's just true. And so you, as a receiver, it's weird because that position is so dependent on other factors out of your control. Yeah. Every position of football it's a team sport, but receiver especially, like, I'm really down on Malik Neighbors' production level this year. I love his talent. I love his future possibilities to succeed. But when Daniel Jones is throwing you the football, it's really tough to believe you're going to have high level production minimum. And that's a tough way to start your career. It really is. Yeah. Like Xavier Worthy, actually, we haven't even talked about him. He could actually lead the league in yards because I think he's got the best quarterback I've ever seen in my entire life, and a great scheme and a ton of speed. And they're going to just really abuse, defenses with his talent level. And his speed. And I actually think it's kind of dangerous. We let Xavier Worthy go to Kansas City. All the factors outside of your own talent level that work to help a receiver, the outside factors really benefit Xavier Worthy. Patrick Mahomes, that offense, Travis Kelce, the speed, blah, blah, blah. We haven't even talked about him, but he could literally lead the league in receiving just given the situation he's in.
Yeah. And then I think after those four guys, right, this draft class had plenty of wide receiver talent. So you've got a guy like Xavier Worthy available late in the first round, a little bit smaller, but obviously lightning speed. You've got Xavier Legette, who came from South Carolina, big body guy that went to Carolina.
By the way, his voice, dude, I love like listening to him talk. I wish he would do a podcast. I could just listen to Xavier Legette like narrate or read a book, like read Lord of the Rings with Xavier Legette doing it. I would kill for that. It'd be so fun.
And then Keon Coleman and Ladd McConkey, right? You've got two more guys who I'm a little bit higher, not a little bit higher. I'm definitely higher on Keon than I am on Ladd. But again, there was so much talent in this draft, and you're 34 picks in, and we've just named 8 guys who have, to me, like legitimate, serious potential. And I think that you look at a lot of first-round wide receivers in the past, maybe like an Aguilar or a Jalen Reagor and guys like that who maybe didn't quite pan out, but for some reason I have this sneaky suspicion that all of these guys are going to work in some way, shape, or form. And Keon Coleman, he's got Josh Allen. Now I'm not sure what Keon Coleman's X's and O's look like. Him and Jordan Travis were going absolutely crazy last year.
Factor Meals is offering 50% off to listeners of this podcast. Factor Meal Kits can give you ready-to-eat meals in 2 minutes. There are 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have new flavors to explore. You can achieve your wellness goals this month with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients you can trust. From breakfast, lunch, dinner, to even dessert, you can stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Do not spend a ton of time in the kitchen. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. And you can choose from 6 Menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat a well-balanced meal. Head to factormeals.com/SOS50 and use code SOS50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box. That's code SOS50 at factormeals.com/SOS50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active.
But again, just so much wide receiver talent and so much potential for these young cats. Walking into mostly good opportunities and to a league that's trending more towards offense, getting these talented guys on your roster, giving your quarterback weapons is so important.
I'm curious. Well, number one, we're in a fantasy draft season, right? And I drafted running backs early in almost every draft. I had 4 fantasy drafts this weekend. Yep. PPR. Yep.
Running backs?
I'll talk about it. So I just did.
We'll talk about it.
I did 4 fantasy drafts this weekend, and it was a lot because we got 4 Strong Opinion Sports Patreon leagues and 4 tiers and relegation, blah blah blah. I have to be in all of them so I can be commissioner in all of them. So I had a lot of drafts, and everyone's picking wide receivers early, and I'm like, look. The thing about it is having a productive running back is more rare. It's just there's not very many productive number one running backs that are kind of be the bell cow that have 1,000 yards, blah, blah, blah. Receivers are a dime a dozen. You can get a talented receiver late in any fantasy draft. Again, Brian Thomas Jr., Michael Wilson, guys, Stephon Diggs fell down the charts often. You're going to find production at receiver later in a draft, fantasy or not. There's just a plethora of receivers across the NFL at all age ranges. Mm-hmm. Running backs are just a rare position to find that are high level production, really good at what they do. And I just want to point out, we're seeing even in college now, receivers everywhere that are great. Running backs are just more rare to find. It's just high level, great athletes are playing receiver. If you're in middle school or high school, they're putting you at receiver where you're making a bigger impact on the game. I want to ask about Adonai Mitchell, and then I want to talk about Lad McConkey's skill set, who I don't know what to make that affected Mitchell.
That's crazy.
Lad McConkey's maybe my unfamiliarity with Lad McConkey is part of what hurt my Chargers prediction, why it was so low. So let's talk about Adonai and Lad McConkey. Let's start with AD Mitchell in Indy with the Colts. What do you see from him, and what's his skill set?
I think AD Mitchell was already listed as wide receiver 2.
Yep.
For the Colts, I could be wrong. I'd have to double check the depth chart there. But it tells you he had an excellent camp for a rookie. From my point of view, I thought he was a little bit too slender as a wide receiver, especially when you stack him up next to Michael Pittman Jr., who's just a physical. He's wide receiver 3.
Behind Josh Downs and Michael Pittman Jr.
Okay, Josh Downs is your slot. So that's,
And you're going to see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets in Indy. Right. He's going to be on the field most of the game.
Yeah, I think you have a guy, again, who's great at catching jump balls. I don't know a whole ton about his route running, to be completely honest with you. But I know that he's obviously got the physical tools. He's got soft hands. He can go up and get the ball at the high point. He's got speed. I would like to see him, over the next couple of years, put a couple more pounds on just to be a more physical presence at the line of scrimmage. But I'm high on him because he's playing next to Josh Downs, just an absolute monster in the slot, eating over the middle. I think he's going to have a big year. Then obviously you've got a bona fide receiver in Michael Pittman Jr. I think he's going to do well.
Do you think the wide receiver setup in Indy is actually a bit underrated? Josh Downs is not a household name. He's a really awesome slot. Michael Pittman Jr., everyone is familiar with. He's like a dream, dude. I'll never forget the USC game. They had a backup quarterback in Utah, where I can't remember the name of the kid. Some backup quarterback just launching bombs, throwing jump balls to Michael Pittman Jr., just making plays. He is a true jump ball number one receiver threat. Kind of like Mike Evans in Tampa. They're similar in my opinion. And then if Adonai Mitchell is really good, which I think he is, that's a receiver room that no one's really talking about, and that is low key really talented. Am I accurate to say that?
Yeah, I think people certainly underestimate Josh Downs. I thought he really started to come on midway through last year, and then he had a concussion, which I believe held him out for a couple of games. But again, he is a guy who just finds a way to get open. And this isn't going to be a one-to-one comparison here, but you think about guys like Julian Edelman, always open over the middle, the Wes Welkers, guys who know how to read and sit in his zone. They know how to beat man if they're matched up with that linebacker. They can beat safeties. He's just such a crafty player and has such great hands. A quarterback is just going to know where he's at and find a way to get him the ball. I love Josh Downs.
I'm trying to remember. I think in the college football playoff game there was a fade thrown. Let me pull it up.
Against UW?
Yes,
Texas
yeah.
against UW?
Was that
exactly
the back shoulder fade? Where? So he can go get a jump ball. I mean, I know he had a lot of slants with an RPO. Adonai Mitchell did at Texas, but he also is a jump ball receiver as well. So man, if Anthony Richardson can be accurate, like they got two guys that can go get jump balls on both sides of the field, and Josh Downs in the slot, plus Jonathan Taylor, plus a quarterback who can run. Like they are and a good offensive line. Like I'm so high on the Colts. I think they're really under the radar. And
they're going to be an exciting team.
It depends on the quarterback, right? But they got incredible coaching. They got a lot of talent that people aren't talking about. The Colts are like low key. They could score a lot of points and really surprise people this year, in my opinion.
They could. I still need to see it from Anthony Richardson. I need to see that accurate delivery. I got to see it. If you're sub 60 in college, very rarely do you come into the NFL and start throwing, 63, 4, 5, 6%. Is it possible? Yes, it very much so is. And I would be excited to see it.
Josh Allen, dude. Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, both in my opinion, were guys who were not as accurate in college as they've been in the pros. Like, say what you want. I watched Justin Herbert throw so many 5-yard hitches into the ground and like airmail random throws. You're like, that should be an easy completion. And it really, when I was evaluating Justin Herbert, did we watch different Oregon games? I watched so many throws that were just totally missed.
We must have, because Justin Herbert had it. The only thing he didn't have was great touch.
Well, he had flashes.
He still doesn't have superb touch.
Let's be very clear. Herbert had a lot of plays where like that's an incredible throw. But paired along with that, my opinion was missed a lot of easy throws that were like, that's a 5-yard hitch. Why is that airmailed into the stands? It really, watching Herbert, it really alarmed me. Like he's making great highlight throws, but he's missing some of the easy gimme throws. Same with Josh Allen in college, where Josh Allen was like so talented, making crazy throws happen, but then missing easy stuff. I wonder if we can see a similar path for Anthony Richardson as we saw with Herbert and Josh Allen. I just wish we got a year watching Anthony Richardson last year. It was so frustrating he got hurt, and frustrating that the sample size is so small. I'm actually ready to move on, unless you have something you want to, I don't want to get into an Oregon debate. I want to hear about Ladd McConkey. What's this skill set for Ladd McConkey, the receiver for the LA Chargers?
He's got speed. He's a route runner. He's got great IQ. He's got very natural pass-catching hands.
What does that mean, by the way, just for our viewers?
Yeah, natural pass-catching hands is just how you catch the football. There's guys, and there's a great clip of it. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., and he's working out with, Quentin Johnston. And you just see the way that they, like, receive the football, the way they attack the football, or the way that they like have to like kind of catch it, and they're not really sure or confident in their hands. And natural pass catching is their soft hands, but they're strong. It comes in nice and tight, and then once it's in there, it's like nice and soft once you catch it, and then they've got a solid grip and they don't let it go. They catch it away from their body, but then it also means they understand how to catch the ball that's a little bit outside their frame. Are you going 2 arms under? Are you going 2 arms over? Are you sliding to make that catch? Are you using your body? And they just have this innate ability to understand the space around them to make the catch that's necessary to keep, number one, keep them safe, and number 2, give themselves the best chance to catch the football. So when I say natural pass catching hands, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you'll see often receivers, the ball will come to them and they're like, their hands are like in the wrong position, and it like hits them in the chest almost like this.
Yeah.
And like, or I saw in the Miami game this weekend, Xavier Restrepo threw, they ran a reverse pass and the receiver's open and he just puts one hand out for the ball and doesn't catch it. And if he puts 2 out there, it was so clearly like a huge catch, if not a touchdown. And he just, hand position matters. So what you're saying, Ladd McConkey's hands are a natural. I love that description of natural pass catch. I don't want to try to repeat it. I just want to say like that was perfect. A great answer.
Yeah.
Dude, I really think I'm wrong about the Chargers. Like Ladd McConkey was, I was kind of like, we'll see. I don't know. But the system, The receivers are quality. That McConkey's got some stuff I didn't really pay attention to. Like, they got an elite quarterback. It's hard not to say 8 wins now, minimum, for this Chargers team. Are they the second best team in their conference? Or their division, I mean?
Man, that's really hard to say.
Them or Denver, right?
Probably them or Denver. I don't think it's the Raiders, but I
Better
think
quarterback.
That both of those teams just have so many question marks, whether that's new coach or new quarterback, or whether that's, just kind of a complete revamp of the system like the Chargers have. But with Ladd, the only deficiency that you can really talk about is just his height and whether or not he can be a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. I think about a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's not nearly as fast, but finds ways to get open and is great yards after the catch like Ladd. So I'm curious, what offense comes from the Chargers and how they decide to utilize them. They still have Josh Palmer, who's your bigger prototypical wide receiver 1, although I don't think he's as talented. That's kind of like the frame and the body that you're looking for. I think Ladd's going to have plenty of opportunities this year, but I'm curious in what capacity he's used, whether that's slot, whether that's outside, whether that's even in the backfield maybe.
Can you lead us now into your line of questioning about young quarterbacks?
Line of questioning about young quarterbacks. Yeah, let's dive into it. I kind of see the young quarterbacks in the NFL in about 3 different tiers right now. There's your, still young but really becoming veterans. I have Trevor Lawrence, Tua, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love in there. Jordan Love I might bump down to like 1 year as a starter. But guys who have been in the league for a number of years, they've seen some level of success statistically. Technically, you could put Burrow in that class as well, but I just feel like Burrow's such a veteran already. The way he carries himself, the success, obviously being in the Super Bowl kind of changes the way we view you.
I would say these are second contract quarterbacks, right? These are guys who have played long enough. Like even Jordan Love has a second contract, and even though he started 1 year, Jordan Love's a young but becoming a veteran because he's on a second contract. I mean, every single one of those names you listed are guys that have been paid now.
Yes, and then I've got the 1 year as a starter, which again Jordan Love could maybe fit into that. He's just kind of a unicorn in this situation. And you've got C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. C.J. Stroud obviously had a lot of success last year. And then you got Bryce Young, who just had a tough go as a rookie. And then you have your rookies. And to me, I'm putting Anthony Richardson in this one. I don't think he got the most fair of spins last year, given the injuries. I'm going to put Will Levis in there. He didn't come on until late. And then you've got Caleb Williams and Bo Nix. Would have loved to have had J.J. McCarthy in there, but obviously he's got the season-ending injury. So I've got not 3 tiers of quarterbacks, but 3 kind of sets of young quarterbacks that, to me, all have a lot to prove this year. You got guys that need to validate getting paid $50+ million a year. You've got C.J. Stroud, who needs to back up his performance last year. You've got Bryce Young, who needs to prove that he was worthy of that first-round pick. And then you've got Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, who they need to prove that they were worth their high draft grades. And then Caleb Williams and Bo Nix, same deal as well. Rookies, and they're going to be starters.
You're forgetting one other name, Jaden Daniels, which I don't blame you for. But in Washington, another rookie starter who, I'm so interested in that Washington offense this year. I'm curious, where you want to go with this conversation about these young quarterbacks, because there's just so many question marks here. All of them, I think, still have something to prove, in my opinion. The consistent thing across this entire list is there are guys who haven't earned benefit of the doubt yet. I would actually put Herbert out of this list in a different category, because I so much believe in Herbert. I'm comfortable putting with Joe Burrow and Lamar and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Like, Herbert has earned his. I know he's been. And I think there are people that doubt Justin Herbert because he hasn't won a ton, because of the fact of what's gone down in LA. But in my opinion, I don't blame Herbert at all for what's gone down. And he's shown he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. The other guys, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love, really have a lot to prove, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts, man, is a question mark, because he's almost like the biggest limiting factor other than that defense in Philly. If he delivers, great. If not, they're going to underperform. Yeah. Tua, man, I think he's proven it, but a lot of people don't believe that. And then Trevor Lawrence, man, A lot of stuff that were not his fault, a lot of drops impact the way he's viewed. To me, like the guys I'm really fascinated in though are Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, the two who like they played a little last year. It's really truly their first year as a full-time starter. So they belong with Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, and Jaden Daniels. But I'm just curious to see, like, I don't want to make any big statements here or predictions. I think it's right to point out that it's fascinating. I view these guys like a science experiment. And we can ask a lot of questions, and then it'll be fun to just see how it plays out. Like, I think Jaden Daniels is incredibly talented. Caleb Williams, man, I think has potential to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I don't know how quickly, maybe this year or maybe next year or maybe 3 years from now, but I think Caleb Williams is going to be absolutely unbelievable. And I'm curious if you have any more questions you want to throw out there about these guys.
Yeah, what I kind of want to get into is how much or how expensive quarterbacks are becoming. And you look at this saga that we have with the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, who, after having, arguably the best year of his career passing wise, can't get the Cowboys to pay him, top of the market money. Now, his top of the market money is significantly more than I believe what these guys are being paid now. Like, he wants north of 60, which is shocking to me. But my point is once you pay these guys that money, it does become harder to surround them with talent. And then you rely very, very heavily on your draft picks. You rely very, very heavily on the guys that you already have in the door, restructuring and working their contracts. We're seeing that, with the Niners right now between Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams. We're seeing that across the league with, players kind of holding out because they want to be paid. How much easier would it be to pay Jamar Chase if Joe Burrow wasn't making 50 plus a year? Right? How much easier would it have been to pay Brandon Ayuk if you didn't pay Christian McCaffrey and you didn't have to think about, oh man, like I got to pay Brock Purdy likely in a couple years. And when you're trying to build these Super Bowl rosters, once that second contract comes, it's time to win if you haven't already. And I'm curious what you think about where this kind of quarterback salary cap game is trending and what it means for guys like Patrick Mahomes to take a pay cut. Who needs to take a pay cut in order to win, with these guys that are up here?
I actually think
I went a lot of different directions with that, but to me, it's just this conversation around how much money we're paying quarterbacks now. Again, for guys who really haven't proven a lot, but have showed, spots that they can be worth that.
There is a fear you can't replace a quarterback anymore, right? And because there was a period of time where it was just so rare to find a high-level quarterback. I've come up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 names in college football alone. Now, spread at different age levels, different eligibility levels, different moments they're going to enter the NFL, but Cameron Ward, Garrett Nussmeier, Miller Moss, Jackson Dart, Nico Iamaleava, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Noah Fafita, Dylan Gabriel, Malik Murphy. I would put Dylan Gabriel and Noah Fafita at the bottom because they're just a little less talented. Malik Murphy is a big unknown. He's got a lot to prove, but he is really talented. He's interesting. I'm not that high on Carson Beck. A lot of people are. But Quinn Ewers, Jackson Dart, Nico, Miller Moss, Garrett Nussmeier, and Cam Ward are all guys that are going to be, I think, NFL quarterbacks and viable first or second round quarterbacks. I would rather draft, Miller Moss or Jackson Dart than I would pay a guy like Dak Prescott $60 million a year. I think Dak's a little better, like truly, like a better quarterback. But are you getting that much return on investment when you're paying your rookie quarterback $40 million for 4 years or more than that a year for Dak Prescott? I guess what I'm trying to say is there's going to be a moment of saturation with quarterbacks. We're not there yet. We're really not, because you look ahead at next year and you're like, well, the Giants are going to need a quarterback. The Raiders need a quarterback. There's not enough quarterbacks, I think, to fill all the needs. But we're getting close to having every team have a quarterback or two. Like, I think Jarrett Stidham could go somewhere else and find playing time. Like, is Jarrett Stidham better than Daniel Jones?
Hold on.
No. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying no. I'm going to argue with you. I'm not saying Jarrett Stidham is a great quarterback. I'm saying he's probably better than Daniel Jones. He's interesting as the QB1 in Minnesota. Like, he's right around number 32, 30. He's definitely in that conversation, in my opinion. He thinks he is, and I actually agree with him. Is he top 10? Is he top 15? Probably not. Is he top 32 in the NFL? Yeah, probably. I really think where the work he's done, the work he's put in, the development he's done, you put Jarrett Stidham in Minnesota, I wonder if he'd be better than Sam Darnold. I wonder if he'd be better than Daniel Jones. I think I'd rather have him throwing to Malik Neighbors than Daniel Jones. I know that's crazy, but I'm honest. I really believe that. Maybe I'm crazy, but I believe that. And so my point is this. We're going to have a lot of quarterback availability next year, and not enough quarterbacks yet for a team to not be willing to pay Dak Prescott. But someday, I think in the future, given how good quarterbacks are getting, how many of them there are, there's going to be a moment where it's like, Dak or Nico Yamaleava, I'd rather draft Nico in the first round than pay Dak $60 million. And someday in the next couple of years, we're going to be at a point where there's just more quarterbacks available that can play than there are people you can pay. And we're not there yet, but we're getting close.
So you think at a certain point there's going to be so much talent at the quarterback level that they're going to look at, a Trevor Lawrence 4 years from now and just be like, yeah, I'm not really sure if we need to pay you what the cap's going to be, like $70 million a year or something crazy like that.
I guess here's what I'm going to say. What's going to happen to people like Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, Dak Prescott, the people that are frankly getting massive contracts, Geno Smith even, they're getting massive money and I don't think deserve it, people are going to hedge their bets and go, I'd rather take a marginally worse quarterback for massively less money. That's what I'm saying. Like, again, is Dak better than like Cameron Ward's going to be next year? Probably, honestly. Like, just given the veteran, given where he's at, who's going to be a better quarterback for the Cowboys next year? I should have Sanders' name. I haven't even mentioned yet. I can't believe I forgot his name. But my point is, like, there's going to be a moment where people go, we'll take a marginally worse quarterback for massively less money and just pay better people around him. Because would you rather have Cam Ward with the receiving core you can pay in Miami, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, or pay Dak Prescott and have him playing with no one, which we're kind of already seeing in Dallas this year. We're going to learn, like, the information we can gather from watching Dak Prescott with very little help this year is going to be fascinating, because it's going to be a great example of a average, a top 15 but not top 10 quarterback, so like somewhere about the middle of the NFL quarterback with not a lot of help around him that's paid a ton of money. What does that look like? Probably not good. Like, Dallas, for research purposes, is a huge opportunity to collect data on what it looks like with a overpaid quarterback that's not top 10, that's not great, with not a lot of help around him. It's just, to me, I'm going to base a lot of future opinions on what happens in Dallas this year. Really, truly. Like, it's a massive opportunity to gather information and learn.
2 more quick questions, and I want each answer to be like as succinct as possible.
Okay.
2 guys, Bryce Young and Caleb Williams. I'm sorry. Let's go Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson. What do those 2 guys need to do this year in terms of having success? Whatever success looks like, what do they need to do to validate their top 5 pickness of last year? What do they need to do? Let's start with Bryce.
Bryce Young has to be not awful. I think expectations are a lot lower for Bryce Young than they are for Anthony Richardson. Part of that is Anthony Richardson's way more talented. But Bryce Young has to win 6 games and not have horrible losses where he looks lost. If he's competitive and doesn't look overwhelmed in every game, then I think you keep him. If there are games this year where he's, almost like Sam Darnold, seeing ghosts and lost, then you got to move on. It's really imperative he's competitive this year. Anthony Richardson has to justify his ability by having a huge year and being a star. It's a really uncomfortable conversation. It's more difficult if he's average. I think you still hang on to him if he's average. If he's bad, it's obvious. If he's great, great. It's really concerning if he has like a Jordan Love level year where there are flashes of brilliance and then, highs and lows still. I think that's what I expect. And then you probably keep him and do whatever you do. But we saw Jordan Love get paid a ton of money after a year with some ugly moments and some high highs that were really great. If that's what Anthony Richardson does this year, that's a success, and that's enough to be like, yeah, he's our guy.
That's interesting. I think that's a good point, though. Like, the standard is so different, right? Like, 2 guys drafted last year. One guy just needs to not look lost, right? And try and do his best to look like a competent quarterback. Meanwhile, you've got Anthony Richardson, who, given all of this talk and Shane Steichen and the weapons around him, he's got to have a banger year. And if he doesn't, we're like,
Same with Will Levis. Like, Will Levis has no excuses. We talked about this, but He's got a good coach. That's an offensive head coach. Worked good with quarterbacks last year and in Cincinnati. He's got very competent. I wouldn't say great, but certainly Calvin Ridley, Nuke, and I forget the third receiver there, but like solid receivers in Tennessee. Tyler Boyd. Yep. Like he's got competent receivers. He's got he's got a solid defense. Like Will Levis has to be competitive this year. It's got to be, or else they got to move on because you can't. There's enough there, enough sample, enough people around him that you're like, hey, this should work. And if it doesn't, it's on you. There's no excuses at all possible for Will Levis this year unless he gets hurt, which would be like a disaster because then you can't evaluate.
That's fair.
Can we talk about? I'd like to talk about Chicago and Kansas City briefly, if we can. I just want to. You have the question out there. I want to say like I'm really high in Chicago. I know you question them. And I guess you even, I'm looking at your notes here, you have that we're curious what sort of offense we're going to see with Shane Waldron calling it, Caleb Williams at quarterback. I think they are good on paper. I'm just going to make a prediction here. I'm really high on Chicago. I'm a big believer. Why aren't you? Like, what's the thing that holds you back from committing to believing the Bears are good?
Because it's the Bears. That's really the only reason. To me, I just need to see how it's all going to shake out. They've got so much talent. Keenan Allen, I think, is on the older side. As great as of a wide receiver he is, how dynamic is he? I know you drafted Rome. You've still got DJ Moore. Are we going to see a running back by committee with Khalil Herbert and DeAndre Swift, or is it going to be Swift heavy? What kind of offense, again, are we going to see from Shane Waldron? Because if it's anything like what was in Seattle, I don't really like it. It's a very, very plain offense, and I don't know if that was because he was limited by Geno or if that's just his philosophy, but I wasn't necessarily in love with what they were doing in Seattle. And when I say what kind of offense, I'm curious, how much off script are we going to allow Caleb Williams to have before they try and rein him in? I think that's one of those things where you kind of have to let him go and figure it out on his own and let him learn how to play more within the system versus Caleb, stop doing this. You have to be able to, take your 3-step drop and throw it and all that kind of stuff. So to me, it's just, there's so much hype around it. I don't want to get caught in the swell. The defense on paper is good. The offense on paper is very good. And it really just kind of hinges on how it comes together. So I wouldn't say that there's anything in particular that's stopping me. I just say, I'm just nervous. I'm nervously excited for this Bears team to finally have a great quarterback and a good franchise.
Shane Waldron is, I would not say an elite offensive head coach, but look, he did do really good stuff with Geno Smith. He's a competent offensive coordinator. The Bears were not going to hire the best offensive coordinator available because they got a defensive head coach. It just wasn't going to happen, But he's certainly not Matt Canada. He's not Arthur Smith. He's got answers to the test. Like, he really will help Caleb Williams. I want to say this. I really cringed when I watched Florida Miami this weekend. Early on in that game, Cameron Ward threw an interception, rolling to his left. Backyard football, trying to make a play underhand. It got tipped and picked off. I was so nervous they were going to keep him in the pocket the rest of the game and not allow him to be him. And I'm glad they didn't. He continued to take shots downfield, extending plays, playing and doing what he does. That's why you bring a quarterback like Cameron Ward to Miami, because of what he can do out of the pocket. It's the same with Caleb Williams. You draft a guy like that so he can be himself, so he can make the incredible plays he can make in and out of the pocket. If anyone tries to limit Caleb Williams, I would say, how dare you? How dare you try to limit a guy? Why did you draft him if you don't want him to be the special player out of the pocket that he is? You're an idiot. You're an idiot to draft him and then try to limit him, in my opinion, truly. That's what makes him a special player. It's what he does that makes him awesome.
Size apart, do you think Kyler Murray and Caleb Williams have similar games?
Similar, but I actually have not been that impressed. I remember this very clearly. I remember evaluating Kyler Murray and Gardner Minshew. Gardner, coming out of college at Washington State and at Oklahoma, Gardner was much better at extending plays and getting out of the pocket and keeping plays alive than Kyler Murray was. I know that's crazy to say. Is Kyler a better runner? Yeah. He's a better athlete? Yes. But the feel in and out of the pocket from Gardner was actually much more impressive. And it's a different skill set. Running straight in a straight line or juking people or being an athlete is not the same as being slippery and extending plays. I was never a great athlete. It was also really hard to sack me, though. I was slippery. I had really good feel for the bodies around me.
You're Michael Penix in there.
Yeah, and so like the thing that Caleb is better than Kyler in extending plays and feeling pressure around him. His feel for the bodies around him and extending plays.
Awareness, yeah.
Yeah, and not that Kyler's bad at it, but I really did think, I remember in that draft process, like, hey, he could take a page out of Gardner Minshew's book. Kyler doesn't have, or Caleb Williams doesn't have that problem. He's already there, and he's awesome. And I really think you have to allow that, and it's such a shame to have a player who's talented at doing that and then try to limit them. That's inappropriate and wrong. It's like, why did you pick a guy if you're not going to let him do what he's good at?
And the most important question was DJ Moore the right pick for my fantasy team?
I don't know. I mean, the Bears paid him. Here's what I will say. Here's how I'll answer that. I'm going to political answer, but it's clear Ryan Poles, the general manager of the Bears, knows what he's doing. Like he's turned into a really smart general manager that deserves benefit of the doubt. He paid DJ Moore, and he's not an idiot. He's made a lot of really impressive, great moves to this point. I don't see any reason to doubt that was also a great move.
Valid. Okay.
Kansas City, are they going to three-peat?
God, that is one of the most interesting questions that I have, and I think that one of the things I'm most excited for is how explosive is this offense actually going to be? Obviously, everybody talks about a couple years ago we lost Tyreek Hill. Not we. Kansas City lost Tyreek Hill. And
as football fans, we all did. We all lost that Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill connection. It was very sad.
And it was so beautiful. And then what you start to see is the defense a lot of defenses recently, like keeping everything in front, right? Don't give up the big ball, bend, don't break. You've now drafted Xavier Worthy, 4-3, Hollywood Brown, I'm pretty sure was a 4-3, if not a low 4-4. You've still got Rashee Rice returning, who kind of came into his own as a wide receiver 1 last year. You've got Travis Kelce back. You've got Jared Wiley, who I think is going to be very underrated for the team this year. Like there's a lot of this core coming back. The defense, for the most part, is coming back outside of L'Jarius Sneed. Was he replaced by Josh Williams? We'll see how he plays out this year, opposite of Trent McDuffie on that defensive side of the football. But to me, if last year was considered a down year, right? They just had to kind of figure it out until they got to the playoffs and then obviously go on to win the Super Bowl. If things are clicking this year offensively and you got two dudes who can absolutely take the top off, you've still got a solid running game with Pacheco, and you got Samaje Perine coming in now with the absence of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, there's a lot of really, really good things here, and I'm trying to figure out, why not three-peat? Who got so much better this offseason that a three-peat is off the table?
Here's the thing, man. Not only who got better to challenge them, but also Kansas City had the 9th best offense in football last year. They got head and shoulders better. They addressed not only they somehow, I didn't realize they were a top 10 offense. Like you would watch them last year, like that can't be. No, they were. They were the 9th best offense from a production standpoint last year. Now they added Marquise Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. They still have Travis Kelce. Rashee Rice is a year older and going to be a little more comfortable week 1. Man, I can't imagine. Like, I don't know if you realize this. One of their leading receivers last year was Noah Gray. You ever heard of Noah Gray? Justin Watson. Justin Watson played at Pennsylvania, not Penn State, Pennsylvania, like the
Ivy League school.
Yes. I mean, man, like Justin Watson's awesome, but that was like their 3rd leading receiver last year. I'm not throwing shade at all. I'm just saying, like, they were doing it with Justin Watson last year, a top 10 offense in football. Their defense is going to be really good. A lot of the same names that were there last year are still there, but they added to it. I actually would argue there's not a team in football that improved as much as Kansas City did, which is like,
interesting. Okay.
They won the Super Bowl last year and they're better, like way better. Oh my gosh, we're not taking seriously how good they are. Truly, it's like, whoa, we got to really, they should be the favorite, because I don't know who's the obvious challenger that's better than them. I can't think of a single team.
I think probably the most obvious challenger. I think that's just a different team is the Ravens. I think if any team that can match up, I think that Kyle Hamilton is such a game changer. Yes, absolutely. They're going to
No,
be
I
a
disagree
physical
completely.
team. They're going to be a downhill running team. To me, I think you're going to see Baltimore actually be one of the best rushing offenses. If you remember last year, I talked about their best rush offense was kind of gimmicky to me. They were cycling through running backs, but a lot of those rush yards came from Lamar Jackson, whether that be design runs or whether he's taking off and running. So how effective truly was their run game? Because they certainly didn't go to it when it mattered and when they needed to in those big spots.
I think their challenger is the 49ers.
I mean, absolutely.
You think you were going to say, you think adding Derrick Henry to the Ravens?
Yeah, I just think that gives them a more physical presence for that downhill run game, provided he can stay healthy, and they can lean on that a little bit harder, as opposed to last year. Again, they put the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands a lot. You got another year with Zay Flowers. I think he's going to be great again this year. I'm sure his role is going to only expand within that offense. And as long as they return everything kind of as is, like they were thumping teams last year. They thumped the Niners, which I think that game could have gone slightly differently, with a few plays changed here and there. But yeah, between them, the Niners, maybe the Lions. I still think the Bengals, like this kind of gets into like my contenders list. Like there's a number of teams, but yeah, I still give Kansas City the edge simply because of Patrick Mahomes.
I think the Ravens up front have regressed a little bit. And I don't even think they're the second best team in the AFC. I think it's probably Cincinnati, Miami, the Jets. I'm all more interested in. I think Houston's better than the Ravens. I think the Ravens are a playoff
Houston's
team.
Better than the Ravens.
Yeah, dude, I really do.
Okay.
The weapons they have at receiver are not impressive to me in Baltimore. Like I'm really down. They're a playoff team, but I'm really down on Baltimore. I think they're like the 6th or 7th seed in the AFC. Just given how good the AFC is, you look at Houston, Indy's really talented. Cleveland is not an easy win. I don't know if they're a playoff team, but they're not an easy win. Cincinnati's really good. Miami's really good. The Jets are really good. Buffalo is, I don't think, really good, but they're a tough out. Like they are really tough. They're going to challenge every team they play. They got a really tough schedule. Buffalo's probably not a playoff team, more like 9-8. But man, I think the Ravens are going to slide a lot. They were 13-4 last year. There's no way they follow that up, in my opinion.
If they follow it up to me with,
but they won't. Joe Burrow was hurt last year, right?
If they follow it up with right, but that doesn't necessarily change how physical they were on defense. And again, the matchup problems that they create between Marlon Humphrey when he's healthy. And again, Kyle Hamilton is a cheat code as a safety over the middle of the field. He can cover so much ground. And again, I think you are heavily disrespecting my boy, Tez Walker. Tez Walker is going to be a lethal weapon for this team when he starts to get familiarized between him and Zay Flowers. Like, I hope so. I really think, and they just have that tough physical AFC North mentality. So there might be another team like the Dolphins who got the flash and flare and can run around and have a great time, but they'll come in and knock your teeth right out.
Yeah, what happened in that game? Didn't they obliterate Miami last year?
Honestly, I can't remember.
Let me look. But yeah, the style the Ravens play is so different than a lot of the other finesse teams in the AFC, right? I wouldn't say Cincinnati's finesse, but they're throwing the football over the yard. Yeah, the Dolphins are throwing the football all over the place. I think the Jets are going to be similar. They play great defense, but they're throwing the football. The Ravens are not elite at receiver. They're not very impressive to me at receiver. I'm not throwing shade at Zay Flowers or Tez Walker, but it's like but it's like they're not. You look around at the other teams; they have great receivers everywhere. The Ravens' weakness definitely is receiver. I think their offensive line isn't the same. But look,
we could say the same thing about Kansas City last year in terms of not having excellent wide receivers. But when you have a playmaker and a game changer like a Pat Mahomes and like a Lamar Jackson and potentially like a Caleb Williams, right? But Caleb Williams got great receivers. Let's be clear there. But when you've got a guy who can completely change the game just by getting out of the pocket and escaping and extending plays, like that makes up for a lot of those inefficiencies. And we saw that with Pat last year. And I think that, again, this year, Lamar Jackson, I don't think he's going to run as much, but I so promise you that Tez Walker and Zay Flowers are going to eat like kings.
Last year, the Ravens beat Detroit 38-6.
Hello.
They beat the 49ers. They beat Miami 56-19. Like the Ravens, Clearly, the way what they do works.
They show up and they whoop ass. They out physical you.
Yeah.
They make it very, very hard for you to get an offensive rhythm going. The way they do keep the ball in play, running the clock. They keep you off the field. Lamar Jackson's on there making plays. They keep you off the field. They're so good. They're so good.
I also think Lamar Jackson's physicality sets a different standard. Like look, I was a princess when I played quarterback. It's one of my biggest regrets is how I didn't practice with the defense. I didn't ever try to do anything other than play quarterback. And I didn't view myself as an athlete. I viewed myself as a quarterback, which was like a huge limitation. I should have been. It's hard to ask other people to be a dirty, gritty players if you're not doing it yourself. Everyone looks at Lamar and respects how he plays. There's no doubt about it. And he sets the tone for everyone else. Like, again, it's really hard to ask someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Like in HVAC, I work in a really tough environment, in crawl spaces, in attics all day. Like the jobs I sell have installers in an attic for 12 hours, for 10 hours, whatever it is. You have to be respectful of that. And if they're going to go in an attic and work for 8 to 10 to 12 hours all day, I have to also do that. And I did do that before, but I try to lead by example. Like I'm not afraid to go into crawl spaces. I'm wearing a shirt like this. I'm dressed really nice and I still crawl around on my hands and knees through the mud, through rat shit, whatever. You have to lead by example. Lamar does that. And that his physicality, I think, encourages more physicality from the people around him. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, you got to lead by example. And when your quarterback's one of the hardest working guys in the building, it just makes your team that much better.
Let's end here if we can. Unless you're gonna. Sorry, I cut you off again. I apologize.
I just wanted to talk about a few teams that I felt like were on the bubble. We've talked about our Kansas City Chiefs, our Baltimore Ravens, our Niners, our Lions. Some of the teams that were great last year, returning a lot of talent that you feel like are going to be great. You brought them up earlier, the Cincinnati Bengals. I think as a healthy team this year are going to be much better. I think Jermaine Burton was probably the steal of the draft, especially in terms of the wide receiver position. Pairing him up with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase is going to be absolutely lethal, I think. Like Joe Burrow is going to have plenty of time to throw the football. I think that the Rams are more of a dark horse team, and I think the Texans are a dark horse team as well. I think both of which you mentioned. That Texans roster is so talented on paper. If CJ Stroud can replicate anything like he did last year, and that defense performs better, not that they performed poorly last year, let's be clear, but with the addition of Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson Jr. in his second year, you'd expect this team to be very, very good defensively. Stephon Diggs, an acquisition we can't look past. Like this team should be so good, and we'll just have to see how it pans out.
I have a really hard time not making Houston. Like I'm looking at your list. You've got Kansas City, Cincinnati, the Ravens, the Rams, the Niners, the Lions, and Philly as contenders. Houston's got to be in that list, in my opinion. In fact, I would put Houston above the Ravens, and maybe I think really like Houston might be one. Like man, to me, like they might be the second best team behind Kansas City. I know that's maybe crazy. They're not a bubble team. Certainly, Houston is not a bubble team, in my opinion. That's an obvious Super Bowl contender. And I maybe I'm alone in that. You're forgetting Miami too. Miami and Houston are Super Bowl contenders, in my opinion.
Miami, to me, Texans, I can see why you'd want to move them up to contenders. I could see them maybe replacing somebody like Philly. But my problem with Miami specifically is just their defense. Their defense, they moved off of a couple guys this offseason. Every pass rusher they've ever had and their family got injured last year. So how are they going to come back this year between Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, like kind of anchors on that team? You lost Christian Wilkins. It's like, where'd your defensive front go? That's going to be a problem. You've still got the safety from Oregon back there. Why am I blanking on his name right now? Javon Holland to kind of anchor you. But, man, defensively, I don't think they can hang with the offenses in the rest of the AFC. And obviously their offense can hang. But, again, if you got to go outside in the cold, in January, in December, can you win a football game when it's not ideal conditions?
Well, here's my I try to challenge what would be a lack of consistent belief, I guess. you really doubt the defense in Philly, yet Philly is a contender in your mind. But Miami's defense keeps them from being a contender. It feels like inconsistent logic to me.
I let's be clear. I doubt Philly's defense because of where they resided last year. I thought their back end was weak, which they didn't necessarily address this offseason, and they didn't play with an identity, and nobody looked like they knew what they were doing. As far as the defensive roster, Philly's roster defensively is far, 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 far better. And then I believe Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator now. I'm more confident in Vic Fangio in that defense than whoever is in Miami having to deal with the health of that defense. That's just how I see it.
We learned
And
from the
pedigree.
USC LSU game what a difference a really good coordinator can make. A lot of the same players at USC. Not all of them, a lot of them. A great coordinator can really change a defense entirely in 1 year. Now, I know that what happens with Vic Fangio is really complicated, but these are NFL players. I'm not worried about them learning a system quickly. I think Vic Fangio is going to have a massive impact on Philly and really elevate them, similar to what the new defensive coordinator at USC clearly appears to have done based on one game against LSU. I will say, though, I think you're harsh on Miami because I don't think you can hold injuries against them. Like, sure, there's questions about health and they're coming back, but like they were decimated. And to me, when you bring everyone back healthy, it should be viewed as, hey, they're better, not punishing them for that.
But is everybody coming back healthy? And you got to look at the injuries that they had between, I believe it was an ACL for Bradley Chubb. Again, Christian Wilkins is gone. He's out the door. He's not there at all. And then in Achilles for Jalen Phillips, it's hard to come back and be explosive. Jordan Poyer, a guy who came from Buffalo, he's a guy who's kind of injured, whether that be his neck, his shoulder, his hamstring. He's a guy that doesn't always play all 17 games.
I think he's Eric Weddle.
Ramsey, of course.
I think he's Eric Weddle going to the Rams. I think this is his last hurrah. He's going to play a team Buffalo he used to play against. Buffalo he used to play for. I think this is the Eric Weddle moment where he's got one last hurrah to make a run at a Super Bowl.
I could see what you're saying. I don't think that defense is talented enough on that front end to really make a difference. Obviously, you got David Long Jr. at linebacker. I think he's solid. Calais Campbell is just old, if we're being honest, in that front. There's no other nice way to put it. And then I look at Philly. You've got Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and Bryce Huff. And then linebackers, you got Devin White, Josh Sweat, and Keely Ringo. And on your two deep, you have Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith Jr., Jeremiah Trotter, Byron Young, the pick out of Alabama, I want to say last year. Like, this defense, again, is just so much more talented and so much deeper. If CJ Gardner-Johnson can just put his shoes on right and stay out of the way, I think the defense will be fine.
I would put Houston as a contender. You wouldn't. You've got the Rams as a contender. I think a lot of people would say they're a bubble team. I think we're in alignment. They're a contender. Team. But they're right. They're right on the edge of bubble contender. They're like maybe the worst contender, best bubble team. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, and I think that before people start talking about like Miami's so much blah blah blah, I think the coaching that you get from Sean McVay, the veteran leadership, and Matt Stafford, you've got Big Pook, you've got Kyron Williams, you've got Cooper Kupp still on that team. You drafted Blake Corum. I think that offensive core is so strong. Yes, you have a young defense, and that's probably what's holding back a lot of these teams. I see these teams have a lot of great offensive firepower with a few having question marks on defense. If they can hold it together defensively, if Jared Verse turns out to be the guy or a guy, you'll turn out to have a really good front there in Los Angeles.
I've got actually two more things. I know we're getting close to time to call it, but I think the Colts should be a bubble team. I think they are. In fact, I would actually argue maybe they won't be, but my expectation is they should be. And if the Colts are not a bubble team, something went wrong. Why would that be your
expectation? Why would that? Okay, so bubble would mean they make the playoffs, yeah?
Yeah.
So that means
that's where they should be at the end of the year.
That means to me they have to win their division. And they're in division with the Texans and the Jaguars, both of teams who I think are better than them and more suited to take that playoff spot. And I don't think that it might be tough for that AFC South to even get two teams in. But
I think the Colts should be better than the Jaguars.
The Texans and the Jaguars.
The Colts, if things go right, Like, I think there's a problem given how much patience we've given Chris Ballard, who I really respect, given the quarterback situation. Like, I'm just saying, I think expectations, right or wrong, should be raised for the Colts. Like, if they're not a playoff team or the number 8 seed, there's a problem. Like, they should be a wild card team minimum, I believe, given the talent, given how patient we've been, given the coaches they have. I'm going to be really disappointed if the Colts don't deliver that. If there's injuries or like, hey, they are number 8 and just everyone's really good above them, I can handle that. But if they're not right there in the thick of it, in the hunt for a playoff spot, that's a problem to me with the Colts.
I can respect that. One guy, I just shout out to him, Kenny Moore. I love Kenny Moore. He's just such a swaggy dude, and he's a great corner for the Colts. Always love when he does well. No particular reason. He's a great guy.
Can we end with this? It's a question. We did fantasy football drafts this weekend. I had an opportunity to draft a defense that many times I was in a position where I could draft a defense before everyone else. And I just didn't pull the trigger. I'm like, I don't know what the best defense in the NFL this year is. It's a huge question mark to me. Is it the Jets? Is it the Browns? Is it the 49ers? The other problem with drafting that is I'm like, well, even if they are great defenses, they got a really tough schedule, so points are going to get scored against them. You're going to laugh at me. And I'm not saying this is the best defense in football. I actually drafted the Falcons defense like a bunch of times because of their schedule. I think they're going to look really good on paper, just given who they're playing against. Who's the best defense in football?
What round did you draft him in?
Wait, almost last, like 14th.
Okay.
Like,
I was gonna say, if you tried to take them in like the 9th round, I'd be like, Zachary, we got to have a conversation.
No, I just focus on other positions to let everyone draft people, and I'm like, I can steal the Falcons defense with my last pick every time. Like the Browns are going to be really good. I think the Steelers are really good with no support on offense. The Lions are a good defense. I wonder if the Packers are an underrated defense. Got a new defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley. I don't know how to really competently have this conversation. I'm curious if you can add to it, but I just want to put it out there. I don't know who the best defense in football is this year. To me, it's actually not clear. There's like one team that just stands out better than everybody. I'm curious if I'm crazy or people are going to think that's insane, but I think the Jets are really good. Maybe they're a contender with good quarterback behind them, but do you have an opinion? Like, who's the best defense in football, or is that just a question you find looming as well?
I think best defense is always going to be hard to answer year in and year out. Kansas City had a great defense last year. They're returning most of their guys. Like, that's kind of a team that we forgot about. Chris Jones in the middle, provided that contract situation works out for him. I believe is he holding out still? I'd like to think he was holding out, but I could be totally wrong on that with Chris Jones.
The top 5 defenses last year on paper were Cleveland 1, Kansas City 2, Jets 3, Panthers 4, which the Panthers being 4 with an abysmal offense is really impressive, actually, and the Cowboys defense. I think the support you have matters, the people that are helping you. Part of why Carolina, by the way, was so good was the division they're in and the schedule they had, in my opinion, which I think the Falcons on paper are going to be a top 5 defense, just given who they're playing this year. But Kansas City and the Jets, having run support, you're in tough games, but you got to get a lot of support from your offense. The Jets and Kansas City are returning a lot of the people back to their defense and going to have better offenses than they had last year. To me, those are the 2 defenses you should eye as like really maybe. Now, the best is hard to answer because best in fantasy means you're not giving up yards.
Sim and the Browns. Yeah, giving up. It's giving up points, right? That's what fantasy is all about, and then also scoring points. So the Dallas Cowboys, how many pick sixes did Deron Bland have last year?
Yeah,
I mean, that's excellent.
It helped me. I had them,
but then they certainly did not show up when it mattered. But I think as far as just as pure as defense looks, without looking at a complementary offense, I think you're looking at the Jets. I think you're looking at the Browns. I think you're looking at the Chiefs. And I think you're looking at the Steelers. I think the Steelers are a mean and nasty defense. Underrated defense. Giants fans are going to love me. I think that defense is very, very underrated in New York. If they can get any level of complementary football, this is one of the teams that maybe I had wrong a little bit. They could get to 6 wins. It's very possible they get to 6 wins if that defense keeps them in it. Again, that pass rush with who we got: Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Bobby Okereke, Dexter Lawrence II. Like, that's going to be a nightmare for a lot of quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's why I really like the Giants-Cowboys matchup. The Giants have a weak offensive line, bad running backs. I love the front seven of the Giants. Like, I think the Giants steal a game from a team like the Cowboys who are not great up front. I want to kind of end here by saying, like, Steve Spagnuolo is just an incredible defensive coordinator. And I think he's found, we talk about this a lot, pairing yourself with a great head coach and learning to be really satisfied with your position, job security, winning, enjoying it. Like, he's been there for a long time. I forget the name of the coach that was in Pittsburgh for forever. The guy who used to blitz like crazy. I'm blanking on the name right now.
Bill Cowher?
Who?
Bill Cowher?
No, the defensive coach. They had a defensive coordinator for like forever who is incredible. It doesn't matter. Like, he has found in Kansas City a really just nice lane. And he's a great coach. They're disciplined. They're in the right spot. I think a Chiefs defense should be looked at as one of the more favorable defenses. A defense you don't want to play. Plus, you're playing in Kansas City where it's incredibly loud. Everything points to me to Kansas City repeating and being the third team or being the first team ever to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. Barring a crazy injury like that team is loaded and they're coming off a Super Bowl and they're better, and not better by a little bit, but better by a lot.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I mean, there's not much else to say. So shout out to Spags keeping that defense right, the way he just dials it up at the right time. Chiefs 3-peat is very much in play. If anybody knocks him off, I think it's going to be from the AFC. To me, the Super Bowl will likely be the AFC Championship. Say what you want, all my NFC people.
Yeah.
But I do think the talent at the top of the AFC team-wise it's just stronger than the NFC. Niners aside, Lions aside, Rams aside, I just think that Super Bowl is coming through the AFC.
Well, it doesn't mean someone couldn't steal a game. I mean, that happens sometimes, but
absolutely.
I do want to say Steve Spagnuolo as a quarterback, like, I would hate that defense. It's not. I actually loved getting blitzed. Getting blitzed meant people were open, right? It meant there's better matchups upside. But the problem is, pre-snap is so hard to identify what the Chiefs are doing, and the delayed blitz, the constant late movement, the stuff they do, it's just so hard to, like, pre-snap, you never get a clean look from Kansas City. And as a quarterback, it's so frustrating. Calling your protection is often so complicated, specifically against Kansas City. And it's hard to do what Kansas City does because it takes so much discipline. It takes everyone being on the same page. Like, coaching a defense that operates the way Kansas City does is really hard, and Steve Spagnuolo does a great job at that. He's maybe one of the most underrated coaches in football, like, for real, because he just every week terrorizes opposing quarterbacks calling protections. It's so difficult. And everyone should do what they do in Kansas City, but the reason not everyone does it is because it's hard to coach that. It's really hard to get everyone on the same page and dialed in. I just think Steve Spagnuolo is just quietly like one of the most underrated coaches in football and deserves a ton of recognition for what his role in Kansas City Super Bowls, and 2 in a row, and especially last year when the offense was down, they carried a massive load in Kansas City, and he coached his ass off.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, man. You got anything to add?
No, I think the only thing I'll add here is just, shout out to the SOS fans again who have welcomed me into this family. I think that last episode that we did with all the predictions, it was so great to see all the conversation happening in the comment section. You guys are passionate about their teams. Some of you guys have some overinflated views of your roster, which is totally cool. But I love the engagement. I love popping down in the comments and chatting back and forth with you guys. I love the insight, about your teams when you're like in it with the beat reporters, like Jahan Dotson, for example. So much great context behind his exit to Philly. Really appreciated that. So yeah, keep bringing that to us. Zach and I love to see that stuff. So I'll see you in the comments.
You'll learn. These people, they all believe in their team. Like, everyone thinks their team is the best, obviously. But one thing I love about our audience, they're so well educated about football. It's
very football smart. Dude, you guys are smart as hell.
fantasy football against these motherfuckers is not fun because there's no like idiots that don't know what they're doing. They all know. Right. They all know like, and unfortunately, they all listen to what I say, so they all know what I believe too. So like they're like, hey, we're gonna drop Brian Thomas because Nathan and Zach said they're really good. Like they all know football. There's no getting one by the goalie against these guys. Everyone listens to this show is so well educated on football, and it makes like the literacy rate for football here is like really high, and it's really fun every week. And I love this show, man. And I want to say, and this is as we're in parting, one of the things I didn't anticipate you bringing to the show that is really beneficial, and I'm an idiot for not recognizing this. Like you watched the Oregon game, I didn't. You watched the Florida State game tonight as I was busy helping my brother fix his car and picking up a PC. Like we have more eyes in the sky than ever. We've got Logan who can comment when we need to. Like, so we've got more people watching games this year contributing to SOS, and it just allows us to do a better job covering everything. It used to be me by myself in my bedroom, like trying to watch, 16 games a week. And if there's ever a week I can't get to something, you could watch it. And then, what did you watch, Nathan? What did you see? And that just adds a dynamic and an ability to the show to more evenly cover football. And I just really, I find that I'm an idiot for not thinking of that sooner, but it really does help the show in my opinion. And I'm just lucky to have you. I appreciate your time and I love you so much, man.
Yeah. Love you too, big dog.
All right. Great job, dude.
All right. We'll see y'all.